Welcome to this special edition of In the Labs with Todd. Every year about this time, my kids start asking me how many more sleeps Dad is until Christmas. Well, it is kind of fun to get them to go up to the calendar and check off the dates as they go by, but wouldn't it be nice if we had an interactive decoration that they could do that with on their own? Well, this is my solution for that. What you can do is you can take this sleepy little snowman and count down the sleeps until that very special day at the very end. Let me take you into the software and show you how I made it. To save time, this first bit is going to be super fast. I wanted to design this so it would fit easily into VCarve desktop, so it needed to be a 24 by 24 inch box. Once I had that set up, I imported in the bitmap that I'd already pre-drawn, and I cropped that down to only the snowman. Then I went through and traced the profile of the snowman. First of all, I used straight lines, and I converted those all into Beziers to kind of get me the shape that I wanted. Once I had that all happy, then I went in and started to draw the details. And you'll see that I actually made these shapes stick outside of the profile of the snowman. That way when my V-cutter came in, it would actually come in from the outside and give me a nice clean entrance. I went through all the different details from the lines around his hat to the carrot nose and then onto his eyes and his mittens and mouth. These are pretty easy to draw, and we have all kinds of tutorials to show you how to do nice vector creation, and that's available on our website. Now the next thing was to start thinking about how I was going to draw the actual decoration that the snowman would sit into. So I created a box, I subtracted out the snowman, only kept half of that box, so that way I was sure that he would actually fit in there nicely, and then I jiggered around those vectors a bit. I filleted the edge of those so they looked more like sort of snowy mounds, and then I went and copied that using the array copy. Once I had 10 of them, then I sized that down to fit inside of my job space. I had forgotten to include in the actual number, so I went back and deleted those and reset that up with the numbers already included in my array copy. That made it super easy to just have to go in and change the number and then the font once I decided what that was going to be. That's always the hardest part of these things. Now once I had those all done, I had to position those, and then I created the star at the end. I didn't want it to be a perfect star. I wanted it to be a little bit wonky like the actual numbers. Now I went and combined all of these together, joined those all up, so I had one long consistent line, and then I added in the rest of the actual decoration. After I had that done, I had to move the snowman to the very end so I could work out the tree. Now I wanted to make sure the tree didn't have any crazy sharp points that I couldn't get into with my cutter. So once I had the tree drawn, I went in and I filleted that all so that I was sure that my cutter could get into all those little nooks and crannies. I added a circle to the top so I had a place to put a star. Now instead of using a perfect star, I decided to go ahead and just copy my wonky star to the top and made that fit in there quite nicely. Now that I had this, I could go on and I could create my actual job. Okay, so what I did was I took that final drawing and that actual job and I just resized it to fit into my material. Now, like I had said, when I drew that up, I had drawn it all up to be the right scale across, not necessarily to fit what material I had up and down. I wanted to fit in that 24 inch by 24 inch envelope you have with VCarve Desktop. So let's have a look at the final file that you're going to receive with this project if you choose to download it. So let's go ahead and open an existing file, and we are going to navigate over to where the file got installed or the project got installed, and we're going to choose sleepstillchristmas.crv, and we'll open that up. Now, like all of our files, you're going to be presented with this important note. Make sure that you read and understand it. The toolpaths in here need to be reset up for your machine and the tools that you have on hand, and also the material that you plan on using to cut this in. So make sure you read and understand all of this, and then click OK. Now right off the bat, you're going to see that the actual dimension of the job looks different. So if we go ahead and take a look at our job dimensions, you'll see that it's a single-sided job, which is what I always intended it to be. The width, height, and thickness are all in millimeters because That's what we use over here in the UK. But if I switch them back to inches just for a second, you'll see that it's pretty close to being 24 inches across by about 8 inches tall and about 3/4 of an inch thick. So you can adjust those to be appropriate for the material that you have on hand. Okay, but I'm going to go back to millimeters for me because this is what I have. So it's 600 across by 200 tall and about 18 millimeters thick. Okay, that's what the material was that I happen to have. I'm going to zero off my material surface. The datum set to the bottom left. I'm not going to scale my design with the job size. And my modeling resolution is going to be standard. There's nothing 3D in this, so the lowest resolution that we have is perfectly fine for this. Unless you want to make this your own and use a 3D snowman instead, then you're going to want to up that to be whatever is appropriate for your particular job, okay? But for us right now, it's going to be standard and fastest, and Canadian maple, of course. Canadian maple. So we're going to click OK. Now, it's going to give us a warning right away and tell us that one of the tool paths that I've created already is going to cut through the material. And that's okay, not to worry about that. I've already planned for that. So we're just going to click OK. Now, having a look at the vectors, they look remarkably like what you saw a minute ago in the fast-forwarded version. There are a few little things that I'll point out. One is that this line on the top of his hat was flipped the other way. I thought it looked better this way instead in the end. And the eye and this sort of shadow brim here are now been merged together in one. And then I positioned it at a safe distance away from my actual rack, I guess you could call this, or my decoration. So that I could actually cut them both in the same piece of material, which is great, without having to rotate it and change the grain direction. I didn't want to do that. So that's just pretty much it. It's one layer, some vectors. We're going to cut this with 3 very simple tool paths. There's going to be a V-carving tool path, a profile cut, and then there's going to be a chamfer tool path. In the end, as you'll see, the chamfer toolpath may or may not be needed depending on the material you're going to be cutting into, okay? So let's have a quick look at our actual toolpaths. Let's pin that down and we will go ahead and tile our views. So the first one we're going to see here is numbers and details. And so if I double click on that, you'll see that I've selected all the numbers, the stars, and the details in the snowman. And we're going to go ahead and use a flat depth of 3 millimeters, just a little bit over 3 millimeters. I didn't want the star to be really pointy. I just wanted to flatten out a nice flat bottom on there, and this seemed to be the right combination for me. I'm going to use a 60-degree V-bit for this. And that's pretty much it. I'm not going to project it onto a 3D model because we're just going to cut it right into the surface. So we can go ahead and calculate that, and then we'll preview that toolpath. Now I've colored it green. I've had a couple people ask me about this. How do you color your toolpaths? Well, up here under the machine area color, you can change your toolpath color if you would like. So in this case, I did choose green only for this preview. In the end, I didn't paint it green, but I just wanted to see it differently colored here to see what it might look like. So let's have a look now at the cutout toolpath. Nothing special about this. It's a very basic profile toolpath. I'm starting at the surface of my material. I'm going down Z, which is the thickness of my material, 18 millimeters, plus 0.2, so I cut right through it into my spoil board. I'm going to use a basic end mill for this. It's going to take 3 passes, and I'm going to cut outside of all these lines. I'm not going to use any separate last pass, and I've added in some tabs, and you'll see them here. And we'll take a look at my tab location in a moment, but I did select those on purpose where they are. I didn't use any ramps or anything like that, and I just renamed it appropriate. And then I calculate that. And it's going to tell me right away that I'm going to cut through my material, and this is why we had that warning earlier, but I did plan for that. So we'll click OK. And then we can preview that visible toolpath, and there we have it. Now, like I mentioned a second ago, I put those tabs in very specific locations. I put them at the end of this decoration, the long decoration, opposed to at the bottom. I wanted that to be cut in one long straight line so that it was true to my machine, and I didn't want to do any sanding on it. I hope that it'd be really nice and flat in the end, which it should be in this case. Put 2 at the end. Not really sure why, but it seemed to be what I wanted to do. I added in 1 at the top, and I also added in 3 to the snowman. And so they're there, and they all work perfect in the end. The last thing we're going to do is look at our chamfer toolpath. And so I'm going around the outside of all of the different shapes, so that the big shape, the snowman, and also the decoration with the chamfer toolpath. I'm going to start at the 0 depth. I'm going to use that same V cutter I used before. I've chosen to go down only 2 millimeters. And so the software figured out all the rest for me, which was really quite great. And then I want to make sure the chamfer type is on the inside. And I just named it and went ahead and calculated that. And then we can preview that visible toolpath. And what it does, or what I hoped it was going to do, is give me a nice sort of chamfered edge. And of course, I learned quite quickly that it depends on the material that you choose, whether or not that's going to work okay or not. So anyway, that's it. That's it. It's not all that complicated. In the end, it's going to take probably, even with the tool changes, about 20 minutes tops to cut one of these. And without the chamfer toolpath and without that tool change in there, I probably could have done it in 10. So anyway, let's go into the labs right now and see how this cut and see how I finished it in the end. We start off by putting our material down on our CNC. That's just a pine board, and put in the VCarve bit and ran the first VCarving toolpath. This is for the numbers, the stars, and also the details in the snowman. I ran this toolpath twice because I wanted to make sure they were nice and clean, and that worked out really, really well and set me up for a nice positive attitude about the chamfer toolpath that I was going to run later. Swapped out that bit, put in the end mill, and ran the profile toolpath, which again ran really nice and clean and fast. Went around the snowman first and then around the actual base of the decoration. The end result looked really, really clean, and I really felt that the chamfer toolpath was really going to add a lot to this. So I swapped out that end mill and put back in the V-bit again and ran the chamfer toolpath. Now, I learned that pine, again, isn't a great material, and as I was moving along with the grain, I ended up having lots of chipping happening, especially across the tops of those mounds, the snowman's head, and the top of the tree. It was unfortunate, but in the end was, I think, a really happy mistake. Now the tab placement was perfect. I had chosen that right on. Cut those tabs out of there, and I could test out my ornament right away. It sat nice and flat on the wasteboard, and the snowman, because I didn't have any tabs on the bottom of his base, fit in there nicely. So that was great. Now I did do a lot of extra sanding here to kind of sand out the error from the chamfer toolpath, although like I said, if I had to use a nice hardwood with a tight grain, that would have looked really, really good in the end. But the blending of all of those chipped edges gave it a really, really nice sort of rustic feel, which I think actually adds to the ornament a lot. Decided to put a bit of a whitewash on the snowman to kind of lighten him up a little bit, and then I was going to go back later and paint in his details. Add a nice dark finish to the base of this. We painted in the numbers and the other details first, and that way when I wiped it off it looked really, really good. Went back to the snowman and added in some details. Really sorry, Michael Tyler, I'm not as good as you are, but anyway, it did turn out in the end okay. And then I went back and added a bit of a clear coat to the top of the ornament, and that really kind of added a nice little shimmer to it. It looks really good, nice and rustic. I think it came out really, really well. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was one of the fastest cutting projects I've ever made so far, I think. Now, please excuse my finishing. As you saw in the video, it really wasn't all that great, and I think you can do a much better job, but you get the idea. I think you could call this more of a rustic decoration. Anyway, don't only stop yourself from using this for how many sleeps it is until Christmas, but how about weddings, special days, birthdays, or maybe even that vacation you've been waiting to take forever now. If you like this, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do. And if you want to make this your own, then just log into your V&Co account and download it for free. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope you keep on making fun stuff. And most importantly, I want you to keep safe.